The night I thought I was just being funny, I destroyed my marriage with one careless joke. It was supposed to be a simple dinner party, wine, laughter, music floating softly in the background while neighbors and friends gathered around our table. The air smelled of roasted garlic and steak, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Daniel, my husband of 10 years, was in the kitchen helping refill glasses, laughing at small talk, his sleeves rolled up as he carried plates with that quiet steadiness of his. Daniel has never been the flashy type. He doesn't wear designer suits, doesn't brag about investments, doesn't drive an expensive car. At 38, he works a stable but modest job. He's dependable, grounded, and good. He remembers anniversaries, fixes things around the house, and somehow always makes me coffee before I'm even awake. But if I'm being brutally honest, I sometimes wished he were more. Not more loving, he gave me that in abundance. Not more faithful, he never once let his eyes wander. But more successful. More like the husbands my friends showed off on Instagram, the ones whisking their wives away on surprise trips to Paris, handing them jewelry boxes with sparkling surprises. And that night, surrounded by those very friends, I let that ugly insecurity get the better of me. The room was buzzing with laughter, fueled by too much wine and playful banter. One couple bragged about their new vacation home. Another teased about whose husband had spoiled them the most that month. It was harmless chatter, until someone turned to me and joked, "So, what's Daniel's big gift for you this time?" I should have just smiled. I should have said, "He gives me enough already." But instead, with a half-empty glass in my hand and everyone's eyes on me, I smirked and said words that would slice deeper than I realized. "Daniel's sweet, but don't expect him to pick up the check. His salary can barely cover my shoe collection." The table erupted in awkward chuckles. A few people laughed louder than they should have, trying to smooth over the tension. I even laughed at myself, thinking it was just another harmless joke, the kind couples make all the time. But when I turned my head toward Daniel, his smile didn't reach his eyes. In that moment, I didn't see the man I loved, I saw his pride crumbling right in front of me. And that was the beginning of the end. I should probably tell you more about who I was back then, because the woman I am today wouldn't dare make the kind of mistake that wrecked everything. I was 35, and I'll admit it, I cared too much about appearances. I measured myself by how my friends dressed, where they vacationed, and what new designer purse hung from their arms. I wasn't a terrible person, at least, I didn't think I was, but I was insecure, always quietly comparing. And in those comparisons, Daniel, my husband, rarely measured up. Daniel was 38 at the time. He had worked at the same company for over a decade, a stable but unglamorous position. He was the kind of man who paid bills on time, fixed leaky faucets, and made sure there was always gas in my car. When my mother got sick, he drove 3 hours every weekend just to mow her lawn and repair things around her house without ever asking for thanks. He was dependable in a way most women pray for. But dependable doesn't photograph well. Dependable doesn't shine at parties. And in the quiet corners of my heart, I craved something shinier. Our friends didn't help. That night, the couples around the table glowed with stories of luxury. Amanda, in her glittering dress, leaned against her husband and gushed about their ski trip in Aspen. Jason and Claire joked about, accidentally, buying matching Rolex watches. Even little things, like the way one wife casually mentioned her husband's Christmas gift being a diamond bracelet, made me flush with envy. I had Daniel. My Daniel, who brought me tulips from the grocery store instead of Tiffany's. Who suggested movie nights instead of 5-star getaways. Who clipped coupons so we could save for emergencies instead of splurging on designer shoes. And instead of seeing that as love, as sacrifice, I let it gnaw at me. We'd had little spats before. They always started the same way, me saying something like, "Why can't you ask for a raise? You've been there for years." Or, other husbands take their wives on trips. "Why can't you surprise me once in a while?" He never yelled back. Daniel would just go quiet, his lips pressed together in that way that told me I'd wounded him. He'd murmur something like, "I'm doing the best I can," and retreat into silence. I knew, deep down, that money was a sore spot for him. He always hated being teased about it, even lightly. I remember once, early in our marriage, I joked in front of his brother about how frugal he was, and he barely spoke to me the whole drive home. But instead of learning from that, I brushed it off. I told myself he was too sensitive. And so that night, when I let my insecurities push me into another joke, I should have known I was striking at the one place he couldn't take another blow, his pride. The night had been going so well, or at least that's what I thought. The table glowed with candles, wine glasses clinked in endless toasts, and the room buzzed with overlapping conversations. Someone told a joke about husbands forgetting anniversaries, another teased about maxed-out credit cards, and laughter bounced off the walls like music. I was tipsy, floating on that reckless confidence alcohol gives you. And then, like most disasters, it happened in an instant, with words I thought were harmless. "Daniel's so sweet." I began, leaning back in my chair as everyone looked at me. My cheeks were warm, my wine glass tilted loosely in my hand. But hey, don't expect him to pick up the check, his salary can barely cover my shoe collection. It was meant to be funny, just a silly jab, like the others being tossed around the table. But the silence that followed told me immediately this was different. The laughter died mid-breath. Amanda's smile froze on her face. Jason coughed into his drink, trying to smooth the moment over. Claire's eyes darted to Daniel, then back to her plate. Even the music in the background suddenly felt too loud, like it was mocking us. And Daniel, my Daniel, just sat there, his jaw tightening as he forced a hollow smile. He didn't say a word, but his silence screamed louder than anything else in that room. I tried to fix it, waving my hand with a nervous laugh. "Relax, babe, it's just a joke," I said, nudging his arm lightly. Everyone knows I'm kidding. But his arm didn't move. He stayed still, his eyes fixed on his glass, as though looking up would expose the raw wound I just carved open. The others scrambled to change the subject. Someone asked about vacation plans. Another cracked a half-hearted joke about mortgage payments. But no matter how the conversation limped on, the air was heavy, suffocating. I laughed too loudly at the next joke, desperate to prove the moment had passed. But Daniel never joined in again. When the night finally ended and the door closed behind our guests, I felt the weight of the silence pressing in. Daniel didn't speak as he cleared the table. He didn't look at me as he stacked plates in the sink. And when I reached for him, he pulled away gently but firmly, like even my touch burned. Then he disappeared into the bedroom. I followed minutes later, only to find him pulling clothes into a bag. "Daniel, what are you doing?" My voice cracked, still wrapped in disbelief. He zipped the bag slowly, then turned to me with eyes I barely recognized. "You didn't just insult my job," he said quietly, his voice steady but cold. "You crushed the man I am." And before I could stop him, he walked out. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just silence. Silence that cut deeper than any scream ever could. And I stood there, frozen, believing he'd cool off, that he'd come back by morning. But I was wrong. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel didn't come back. At first, I told myself he just needed space. That he'd cool off, call me, maybe even laugh about how dramatic he'd been. But the days stretched into silence, and the silence stretched into something heavier than I could bear. I texted him every morning. "Good morning. I love you." Sometimes I got a polite reply, "Good morning." I called him at night, desperate to hear his voice, and when he answered, it was brief, almost formal. He sounded like a stranger who was tolerating my call, not my husband of 10 years. And then came the whispers. Friends who had been at the party started talking. One, just checking in, text from Amanda came with a sharp edge. I'm sure you didn't mean it, but people are still talking about what you said. Others weren't so subtle. I overheard two neighbors at the grocery store whispering, she humiliated him. No wonder he left. Humiliation settled over me like a second skin. The house, once full of Daniel's quiet steadiness, suddenly felt like it was collapsing in on itself. Bills piled up, and I realized just how much he'd handled without complaint. The mortgage, utilities, insurance, I had never truly appreciated the invisible weight he carried on his shoulders. Now it was mine, and it was crushing. And then there were the photos. One night, scrolling aimlessly through social media, I froze. There was Daniel, tagged in a picture at a bar with colleagues. He was smiling, genuinely smiling. His shirt was new, sharp, tailored. He looked lighter, freer, like a man who had shed a burden. My stomach twisted as comments flooded beneath the post, looking sharp, man, and congrats again, Daniel. Congrats. I spiraled, anger at him, shame at myself, regret so heavy it stole my sleep. I replayed that night over and over, my words, the silence, the look on his face. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. And then, the truth slipped out. Over coffee with a mutual friend, I begged for news. She hesitated, eyes flickering, then sighed. He probably wanted to tell you himself, but Daniel got a job offer. In another city. Triple the salary. Triple. The man I mocked for not making enough had been on the verge of everything I thought I wanted. And I'd thrown it all away with one careless laugh. I couldn't take the silence anymore. The whispers, the loneliness, the weight of my own guilt, it was unbearable. So one evening, heart pounding, I drove to the apartment a friend told me Daniel was renting. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door. When he opened it, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was neatly styled, his shirt crisp, his whole presence lighter somehow. He looked confident. Like a man who had been set free. Daniel, please, I blurted before he could close the door. We need to talk. Just hear me out. He hesitated, then stepped aside. I walked in, my eyes scanning the small but tidy space. It didn't feel temporary. It felt like home. His new home. I'm sorry, I began, my voice breaking. That night, I was stupid, careless. I didn't mean it. You know I love you. He looked at me, his expression calm but unreadable. Do I? He asked softly. I rushed forward, desperate. Of course you do. Daniel, please, I miss you. I miss us. We can fix this. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he sighed, sinking into the armchair across from me. I didn't tell you this, he began, because I wanted it to be a surprise. I'd been in talks with a company for months. A big opportunity. I was waiting for the right moment, to tell you I got a promotion, a salary 3 times what I was making. I thought I'd finally be able to give you the life you wanted. The vacations, the gifts, all of it. His words hit me like a knife. I covered my mouth, tears spilling down my face. But that night, he continued, his voice steady but laced with hurt, you confirmed the one thing I'd always feared. That my worth to you was tied to numbers on a paycheck. That everything I was doing, the bills, the sacrifices, the nights I stayed up late worrying how to make things easier for us, meant nothing. You laughed at my struggle, but never at my sacrifices. I wasn't ashamed of my salary, until you made me believe I should be. I sobbed, reaching for him. Daniel, no, that's not true. I was insecure, I was jealous of our friends, he gently pulled his hand back before I could touch him. I found peace, he said quietly. I'm not angry anymore. But I can't go back to a place where the person I love most sees me as less. My pride, my dignity, once those are gone, there's no marriage left to save. The finality in his voice crushed me. And in that moment, I realized, I hadn't just lost Daniel. I had destroyed him the very moment he needed me to believe in him the most. I still replay that night in my head like a broken record. The laughter, the wine, the smug satisfaction I felt when I thought I was being witty, and then the silence. That crushing silence that followed me all the way home and has never truly left me. I wanted to look good in front of others. I wanted to be the woman with the funny lines, the glamorous lifestyle, the husband who could keep up with the friends I foolishly idolized. But in trying to make myself look bigger, I made Daniel feel smaller. And in doing that, I lost the only man who ever truly cared for me. People think betrayal comes from infidelity, or lies, or secrets. But I know now, it can come from one sentence. From one careless moment where ego speaks louder than love. Daniel never raised his voice. He never called me names or threw accusations. No, his silence after my joke was louder than any fight we ever could have had. It was the silence of a man whose heart had been broken in a place beyond repair. I destroyed his dignity. And once a man's dignity is gone, love doesn't survive. You can beg, you can plead, you can cry until your throat burns, but there's no undoing words that cut that deep. I thought he'd come back. I thought he'd forgive me like he always did when I pushed too hard. But this time, he didn't. And maybe that was his way of showing me the strongest revenge of all. Not anger. Not hatred. Just silence. Now, when I see couples laughing together, I wonder if they know how fragile it all is. How quickly a thoughtless word can shatter years of trust. I wish I had known. I wish I had guarded my tongue the way Daniel guarded our love. But wishes don't change reality. Reality is me, alone, haunted by the memory of his quiet exit, and by the knowledge that somewhere out there, he's thriving, finally being seen for the man he always was. Just not by me. Not anymore. I thought a joke was harmless, but his silence became the loudest revenge. And so I'll ask you, whoever you are, listening to my story, do you think one careless joke can destroy a marriage, or was he too sensitive?